Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Stepping Up to the Plate. I'm your host, Michael Vega. So glad you could join us for a special edition here. We have a special guest, Derek Crothers. He was the proprietor of the Middle Way Meditation Center in Lower Mills. And we're here joined also by my main man, Al Prizzuti. And Derek, thank you for joining us here at the show. And
pleasure.
We wanted to kind of, get with you and talk a little bit about your business as a meditation instructor and a mindfulness facilitator at your business, Middle Way Meditation Center. And, it's interesting. And, everyone, in sports also, practices mindfulness and well-being and whatnot. But a lot of people also do that too.
Sure.
You don't have to be an athlete. You can find your own way through meditation too. And one question I have for you right off the bat was, what in your mind defines mindfulness?
What defines mindfulness? Great question, Mike. So to define mindfulness, I'd like to even take a step back and let's define what even is meditation, right? What is mindfulness meditation? And I'm a big fan of analogies, and one way you could think about it is if I have a glass of cloudy water,
right,
or muddy water, and I'm holding it in my hand, it's constantly getting agitated. But if I set the glass down and let the glass become still, the water in the glass will settle and become clear. So with meditation, we let our bodies become still, right? And when our bodies can become still, our mind can become clear.
And calm.
And through that clarity is clear speaking, clear knowing, clear mindfulness. That could be what defines mindfulness, that clarity.
That's a great way to describe it. Is that what, some of your clientele, when they come to you, is that what they wind up, achieving, through a session at your studio?
So everybody is on their own journey, and what I can provide, or what I provide, is that space, right? That space to come and practice. And we have people from all walks of life dealing with all sorts of situations who want to get into meditation or mindfulness for all different reasons.
Yeah. And, and it's something that's become prevalent in the world of sports too, where athletes, I think, have sought out mindfulness meditation to help with their performance on court, off court, and stuff like that.
So look at George Mumford, right? Prominent mindfulness coach for the NBA, right? Michael Jordan, LeBron James, maybe.
Sure.
Kobe. And yeah, his take was using that mindfulness, from what I understand, to incorporate it with performance, right? He called it the flow, right? The flow state that these athletes can get in.
Yeah, and it's when they attain that level, it's when they're at their peak performance, it seems like. But it's interesting to hear Gino Auriemma, who's a coach, University of Connecticut women's basketball coach. They just won their 12th national championship, 24th trip to the Final Four. And to see him, coach his team hard, coaches them very hard, but it's to prepare them for the moment. And he knows that eventually that they're going to break down physically, but he wants to toughen them mentally so that they are present to make the right choices and to execute and perform.
Well, I think that sports is just a micro of the macro. Everybody looks at sports because it's a release for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it's just what's happening in the macro in the world happens to sports figures as well. A lot of people don't realize that. But what's fascinating to me is if you ask people what is the biggest killer, people will say cancer, or people will say heart. Anxiety is the number one killer in the world.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pressure put on these athletes.
And not only that, but there's a lot of pressure put on people, and
Yeah.
they're anxious and anxiety. And how do you channel anxiety? And it sounds to me as if yours is an avenue to do that.
So that's a great point, because that's actually how I got into this whole thing. I was going through some tumultuous times, an addiction to alcohol and some family troubles, and I found the mindfulness-based stress reduction course, and I never looked back. And that's what helped me to be able to overcome the stress, the anxiety, and even some physical symptoms like high blood pressure, rapid heart rate, depression, panic, that sort of thing.
Now, Derek, you have performed in the field of sport yourself,
Correct.
and as a Muay Thai fighter, or
So I've done some combat sports in the past, jiu-jitsu, and currently training some Muay Thai. Yeah.
now it took you where, to Thailand? You said you traveled there.
I did. I traveled to Thailand, and when I was in Thailand, not only did I study Muay Thai and the sportive aspect of that, but I was able to have the opportunity to study with some monks in that area, and I did like some retreat stuff there.
Define Muay Thai for me. I'm not
So
familiar
Muay
with
Thai, you could think of it as kickboxing.
Kickboxing.
that. Okay.
So boxing is just fists.
Right.
Then there's kickboxing. Then Muay Thai, even up another level with knees and elbow strikes.
It's close to MMA fighting.
Get up your gun too. Might help you even more.
How does your meditative practices, or has it come to bear in that field for you?
So I would refer back to the flow state, as George Mumford called it, because you get into the gym and you practice, right? You practice your drills and your techniques on maybe a punching bag or a heavy bag, and then you practice with maybe somebody holding the pads for you, and then it's time to test it in sparring. And that is a real opportunity to bring mindfulness into the equation, because if you're not paying a particular attention to that exact moment, then you're not avoiding strikes, you're making mistakes,
Right.
You're not able to deliver your own strikes in that
And
situation.
you're absorbing that punishment.
You're getting damaged, and ultimately you may lose the match.
Yeah, it's
So
interesting.
On the continuum, though, somebody comes to you and has an issue. I'm sure what you do is you interview and talk, and what are you looking for and whatnot. So let's say the initiation of the continuum is, all right, I have this, I have stress. I'll give you an example. Myself, my sister, who's 69 years old, has just gone into for dementia, which is young. In here, and thinking, you hear dementia is an old disease. So it's affected me. I'm her older brother. And to see her when I go, we can talk. She knows me. And then she'll say things like, well, the other day I went and spent 2 hours with her, and as I was leaving, she goes, oh, can you drive me home? And I said, well, I had to make up something. I said, I can't. I got to go pick up my son, and he's on the other side of the. She goes, well, how am I going to get home? And she's looking at me like this.
Yeah.
And when I got to the elevator to leave, and she wears an ankle thing so she doesn't leave, I said to my wife, I'm lost. I have never not been able to help.
Yeah.
And there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
And my other sister will call me and she'll say things like, well, maybe she'll get better. I'll say, listen, you don't understand. It's a progressive disease. There's nothing I can do. And they all look to me.
Yeah.
And I go,
They can't expect you to fix it, Al.
well, they can't. But the problem is at some point you sit back and say, I've never been in this situation before where I can't do something. And it's a very difficult thing. So to the question, though, on the continuum, if I was to come to you and we talked, what's the end game?
So, thank you for sharing that story, by the way.
No,
It
thank you.
reminds me of a very personal story I have as well with my grandfather, who was diagnosed a little later, not quite so early. And I had visited him at the house. This was before he got put into like a rehab
assisted living,
situation. And,
Memory loss.
I thought I was having a lucid conversation with him. And then on my way out the door, I'm saying my goodbyes, and he's like, okay, I'll be sure to vote for you, whatever. He thought I was a politician there to earn his vote.
Wow.
So, and that stuff can be so devastating.
Yeah,
And for me personally, like you do hear about other, the other prominent diseases and stuff. But for me, the dementia is the absolute worst. It's the worst because I can only speak for myself, but you've already in a way, or I've already in a way lost that person that's special to me, even though their physical body is still there. And through meditation, and I can only speak for myself and my experiences, but through that clarity that happens, it's possible that you can expand your capacity to hold these things. One, I'm a fan of analogies, so I'll give another one, is that glass of water. Say that glass of water now is 3 to 5 tablespoons of salt. That's tough to drink, right? But if that same vessel or that same water, the same amount of salt, the vessel is as big as this table, right? Then drinking it's no problem, right? It doesn't even affect it.
Yeah,
and so, and so through meditation, oftentimes you can develop the capacity to be with these things and hold these things.
Well,
and just knowing that this too is life. This too is a human experience.
I think you need to, that's the good thing. See, and I think even talking through some of this stuff is what you need to do. I call it the onion skin, peeling the onion skin.
The layers.
See, when I have a problem, and it's one problem, I can handle it. But I got my sister, and then I got my son having a problem, then I got my other sister having a problem. So then I go, when all these layers start to come on, it gets very difficult to move from one to the other.
But and this is what meditation helps with, I would think. It helps you take care of you, because sometimes we need to take care of ourselves in order before we take care of anybody else. And I find that, when I find myself in a stressful situation, I try and slow down the situation. I try to control what I can control.
That's all you can control.
And
I can't.
And that's the thing, and not let anxiety overtake me, because then that controls me, and I can't manage the situation in that state. So, it's breathing maybe. And it's funny that that's got to be integral into any kind of practice of meditation, because it feeds our body with oxygen, doesn't it? And that's a life source.
The process of the breath is actually one of the main meditation components, not necessarily manipulating the breath, but just noticing the exchange of gases with the universe, the atmosphere, right? That every living thing does. And even smaller, to dial it into the sensation of breathing, right? And it's noticing or having the awareness, the mindfulness of that sensation of the breath during the meditation that allows your body to settle, that allows your mind to settle and become clear. Exactly.
And become still.
And become still.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing for me to do at the end of the night when I'm working, and you're in a high pressure situation all night long, and all of a sudden, you reach the end of the night and at the end of your shift, and you're like, oh, and my mind is still racing. I'm still going 100 miles an hour, and now the only thing I can do is to sit in front of a TV to kind of numb my mind. And then what happens, Derek, is that sometimes I get stimulated by what I'm watching.
Yes.
You know, like I'll watch a documentary and I find, or Al will recommend something. Hey, you got to see, and I start watching it.
Yes.
And it engages me. And then before long, I know it's in the wee hours, and my wife is looking at me to come upstairs to go to bed.
Yeah.
And then I get a bed, and you sit there, you stare at the ceiling, and you're like, and so I try and still my mind by breathing, holding my breath, taking 5 draws, holding it for 5 seconds, and then exhaling, and then taking a deeper breath, and then holding it for a little bit longer, and then exhaling.
Yeah, there's a lot of different breath exercises like box breathing and stuff like that. It's a little different than meditation, but it for sure can have a similar effect.
And like I said,
the body.
I noticed it, from guys like Mac Jones when he was quarterback here at the Patriots. He would do that to kind of control, slow things down. I've noticed it with, Rafael Devers. He was going through this 0 for 19 streak. And he would step out, and you could see him. At some point, he was like inside his head. And people could see that. And then finally, when he got on base on a walk, he takes this big breath, and you could see the weight of the world lifting off his shoulders.
Yeah, and you said it, Mike. And why are they taking these breaths, right? To still their body. Right. Which in turn, because what they really want is the stillness and clarity in the mind.
And that brings me to the next, matter is it's presence of mind. The presence of mind, and that's something that is a term that often goes, it's often used, but maybe overlooked a bit. But coaches will often say, well, he had the presence of mind, when he comes up with a great play in a clutch situation or a pressure situation, and you see that often football, basketball, baseball, even, in sports gymnastics where they're performing under heavy pressure, and I think the pressure is what can cause someone to crack or perform, better. And when they have mindfulness and maybe a presence of mind, it seems like.
I think understanding, though. I mean, I played a lot of sports. Okay?
Golf. Oh, I mean.
No, but golf. I mean, in every sport that I ever played, the pressures, outside pressures that affect you. In other words, my father always thought I was going to be the greatest ball player. And there was a lot of pressure on me. If I didn't do well, he wasn't an easy guy. He'd say to me, "Oh, you'll never make it," or da 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 da, and this and that. And then when you have to start to realize, though, this is what I am. Because if you really believe you're going to get there and you don't get there, that can be a crushing blow to somebody. But if you start to say, I'll never be a professional baseball player, but I wouldn't mind playing in the minors and whatnot, because I'm limited. I'm not a 5-tool guy. I can't run. I can't, whatever. But if you go, I can make it. Everybody tells me I can make it. And you don't know if you can make it. That's a bigger problem. Yeah. That's a big problem.
And it's a timely topic here, in Boston now with the revelation Jaron Duran had contemplated taking his own life when the pressures in his world, became so great, they became unbearable. And the thing that he did was to come out and to seek help. And then he revealed it in this new Netflix documentary that's out about the Red Sox season of a year ago. But in doing so, it seems like, he rescued himself. And he became a better player. And then last year had a breakout season where he was an all-star and he became the MVP of the all-star game, and everyone celebrated him. But now everyone is looking at him differently as more of like someone who, to be celebrated for his courage to come out and to discuss that,
Yeah.
But to the point of his mindfulness at that point, like Al was saying, he's looking at himself in the mirror and he's tearing himself up. That's the only thing he can think about. And it's to the point where he lapses into that, goes off into that dark abyss, In a sense, I think that what you practice with meditation, mindfulness, teaching the presence of mind, maybe to still ourselves, helps us, in regard to take care of ourselves, doesn't it?
Sure.
Yeah.
But it's like with Duran. I mean, it's kind of an interesting situation because, see, I believe a little differently than a lot of people. I believe that when things are going well, you don't need people to tell you, oh, you're good, you're this. Like Duran's getting now, he made the All-Star team, like Mike said. I'd be more interested in what's going to happen to this kid if he has a bad season or a bad stretch.
Well,
Because then people are going to start coming back at him. Oh, you were the guy who called this guy. Oh,
No.
you were the guy who couldn't do this and this and that. You know what? Maybe we overrated you.
No.
And how he handles that.
but he's going to have the support system from Cora, his teammates, and people around him. I don't think they're going to just
And
cast
maybe even
him
a
with
certain resilience if that was a real
Right.
scenario. Yeah.
So I think what happens with, I'll give you an example with myself. I like what you do in analogies. This is not an analogy. I went to Ohio State. I thought I was going to play football there, and I played freshman. Okay, then I went out for the big team, and I looked at 6'5", 290 guys who could outrun me, outlift me. I wasn't going to make it. I thought I was going to make it, and I went out for it. And the coach, first day, the coach said to me,
Woody Hayes?
he said to me, I understand you play baseball. You're a pretty good baseball player. And I knew I was going to get cut that day. So the point I'm getting at there is that the expectation that I had going in was here. But I also looked and I had an understanding that, you're better than me. I can't reach that level, and I could handle it. Again, my wife, it's interesting how people react. My wife comes from 5 kids. Her father was an alcoholic. And my wife handled it very well. One of the girls didn't. One of the boys didn't. And everybody went, oh, that's because my wife's father was an alcoholic, and it didn't affect her. How come it affected him? Or how come it affected her? Everybody handles things differently.
Yeah.
And you know what? My wife never went to counseling. She never did this like Al-Anon and things like that. She never did. And she loved her father more than her mother. And I couldn't understand it because her father we called him a Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah. But it's interesting how people deal with these things too. But
that's the important thing.
Right.
How you handle it. And where do you go to understand that you're not alone,
right?
Or that you're not the only
that's so
one?
Big right there, because once somebody, and we could use the baseball player analogy. Once somebody gets caught in that trance, right? We'll call it a trance. That state of feeling an emotion where they're so down on yourself. They're looking in the mirror. They're saying these things to themselves. How your world becomes so small and you feel like it's not interconnected, like there's not anybody else, right? But if you can, through maybe mindfulness or something like that, lift yourself out of that trance, right? Then it becomes about seeing how, everything is connected.
Yeah.
Everything is connected and we're all in this together.
Right. And people who have debilitating circumstances don't think that they're connected. They think this is happening to me.
To me.
My sister calls me up and my other sister, and she'll go, everything's, I seem to have a red flag over me. Everything's happening to me. I said, well, it's not you.
It's not you.
Everybody has to go through it. Look at your sister.
It's the human condition. Yeah.
How about her red flag? So don't. And I can be a bastard. Excuse me. I can be tough because I can say things like, "It's not. There's no red flag over you.
Right.
It's over everybody. It's how you handle red flags."
There's a phrase that I'll share with people sometimes when they say, "Why me? Why me?" And it's, "Why not me?
Right.
Why wouldn't this also, because I'm human too, happen to me?"
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we all have to kind of like find our way.
Yeah.
That's a big thing though, because when you believe, see, if you sit back here as an observer, and then it happens to you.
Mm-hmm.
How you respond to that, where before you might have said, oh, what a jerk he was. Now it happens to you and you go, I understand now. Another example, I was watching Channel 2 last night on that, Knowing Your Roots. And the guy Gates who runs that,
Henry Louis Gates.
they did it for him. And he said,
really?
Yeah, you should watch it. It's interesting because what he did, and he said, they found out that his grandmother, who was black, had a slave owner who was white, who then turned around and gave her freedom and then bought back her sons. And the guy read the thing and he said he bought the sons for $500 and the girl for $300. And I'm watching this and I said to my wife, I'm white. If I ever saw that my relations, grandparents, were bought by somebody for $500 or $300, I would be livid.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it doesn't happen to me. It didn't happen to me whether they were indentured
What was his
or-
reaction?
Well, he runs the show, but this is the first time he was ever done. He said, you know what? There's a Kelly in my family
Oh.
who's white. So he said, you know, a lot of people don't realize that a lot of these slave situations are mixed mulatto things, and that there's white and black in a lot of people. He said it's an acceptance. You have to understand what it is. Once you know what it is, then you can't make assumptions. You know.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing. I'd love to be able to do that on my family.
And right, part of the seeing clearly is taking that veil away,
Yeah,
right? Taking the veil away.
Taking the onion skin away, right.
Taking the onion skin away, showing the who's behind the curtain, and using that to eliminate the sort of ignorance, right? That was
bias
that
and
was once
ignorance.
there.
I mean, exactly.
Well, we want to thank you, Derek, for coming in and sharing your wisdom and your expertise here on mindfulness, presence of mind and meditation. You can find him at the Middle Way Meditation Center in Lower Mills. You want to give the address where they can
60 Adams Street, Milton, Massachusetts.
Excellent. And we
North
got to give a
Florida.
shout out. I want to give a shout out to the Milton High Theater Group for winning a state championship, and Derek's own daughter, Sadie.
Sadie, whose 16th birthday is today.
Oh, congratulations,
Happy birthday,
Sadie. Congratulations to everybody. And want to give you a shout out as well, Milton High Theater Group. All righty, that's going to do it for us this week. We look forward to spending time with us here on Stepping Up to the Plate.